Hello, everyone. I'm Chintu Parikh, VP of Marketing at ANOPS. Today, I have a pleasure of hosting Jeffrey Malcolm, Operating Advisor with Goldman Sachs Private Equity Company. Uh, Jeffrey is well known in the private equity world and also in the CIO world. He comes with a lot of experience managing large team, IT teams, and now he's kind of advising a lot of portfolio companies, especially on the AI costs. So we're going to have a very interactive and fun discussion along with at the very end, we will demo the product based on our discussion. We kind of highlight some of the features we have built. We'll make this conversational. Keep your questions coming. You can add them as comments in LinkedIn Live. And with that,
Absolutely.
welcome, Jeffrey.
Hey, Chintu, it's great to be here. Good to see you again. I know when we last saw each other at PEI in Napa, this was the topic that I spoke about the most. This is top of mind. I'm excited to be here and share with everyone what I'm seeing across my portfolio companies and just talk about how, NOps is helping with that. So I look forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Let's get started. So this is a famous chart from Goldman Sachs, right? And this is making rounds. We are currently at 6 quadrillion tokens, right? Somewhere in that neighborhood. But the the fun part is it's supposed to go up by 24 times in next 3.5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exponential growth, and there's a dollar amount attached to that. But given that, we are seeing companies, like from a maturity standpoint, there are companies who are starting to experiment with AI. They might be token maxing, encouraging employees to token max because they want them to start using AI, all the way to companies who are like, hey, what value am I getting? I'm spending millions. What value am I getting? Are my engineers producing the features faster? But more importantly, are they producing the features that are leading to new revenues or reducing the cost of building that feature and all of that? So the question for you is, as you work with portfolio companies in that maturity curve, where do you see most companies are, and more importantly, what are the biggest challenges right today?
It's a great question, and Chintu, you know me. I'm a golfer, and I always like to think in analogies. So in the game of golf,
right?
I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. In the world, if we look at if you look at golf, it's like, hey, you go practice and you start off heavily in the driving range just to kind of get your swing right. And you finally get out and then you play. And as you're playing the course, you realize that you need to do course management, and then finally, you get up to be a scratch golfer, and then you end up on the PGA where you're getting the full value for your work. If I put our companies in that frame, I would say a lot of our companies that I'm working with right now are still in the experimental phase. They're at the ending part of token maxing because we've all received the bill. And we realize that token maxing is not the way while it helped adoption, it broke the budget. You have companies out there like Uber who ran through their budget within the first quarter of the year. So, the experimenting phase is where companies are. They have purchased the tools. They are all across different departments. And unfortunately, a challenge right now, the spending is coming up in many different silos and not in an aggregate way. We also have some companies who have embedded AI into their group. We see it a lot within our product engineering group that are focused around driving value just from the coding aspect of that. And that's hopeful. That's starting to move into this, hey, okay, we're moving into the more visibility phase, and we understand what workloads is going on. When I look at that in terms of how that's working, there's 3 challenges that I see with this model and this kind of curve. One, there's no unit cost measure of what the work is being done. It reminds me, Chintu, when our relationship started around the cloud phase, and we wanted to bring you guys in to give us cloud visibility. There was workloads going on all over, and it took us a while in the cloud transformation to really tie a workload to costs. And that's one of the key things I wanted to share is that. So we don't have that unit cost measure yet in AI, but we need to get to that. And the AI spend is moving fast. So that's one of the first things that I see. The second challenge I see is while the cost curve is not linear, no one has modeled it. So a pilot that had 200 users is cheap. But if you expand that to 4,000 users, that cost is completely different. So how do you budget for that? How do you model that? It is not linear, and that's something that is really
because adoption is growing faster and use cases are changing.
Absolutely.
Also, yeah.
Absolutely. And then the final piece that I would say with this is there's no true owner of that AI cost. A portco who owns AI spend, like when I walk in, I say, okay, I hear one person say that's the CFO, another person says that's the CIO, another person say that's the CTO. So there's no true really owner. Of course, the CFO sees the invoice, but the business that's driving the consumption is not really being tied in and at the workflow. So when I look at this whole piece around it, those are the three challenges I see that we're facing to really, manage and drive maturity around AI adoption.
Yeah, I think we all want to get to that value equation, right? Like, how is this helping? But it's going to be a journey, like you said. What we have seen this with cloud, but this is widespread. Unlike cloud, which was just platform engineers and product teams getting involved. Here, it's everybody's using AI, from sales to marketing to customer support to engineers, right? So my next question then is like, hey, you said difficulty getting your arms around, like, and people are like Shiloh, right? Like, and in that case, why is the spend visibility so difficult for the portfolio companies today, right? What are some of the challenges do you see there? You had mentioned the other day example. We won't name names, but
yeah. I had shared that, and I won't name names. But before I go into that, I'll give you a number. In most portcos that I walk into, the first inventory finds somewhere, between 2 to 4 times the AI spend that finance knows about. So pretty much someone would start off with a budget and say, hey, we're going to budget $1 million. In most places, I'm seeing that being increased either 2 to 4x of that amount. And it's not because anyone is hiding anything, but it's because it was never really named. It was never really a baseline around how that should be measured. And I look at this in really, 4 areas, I would say. The first thing I would say is, when the AI spend comes in, it's not really a line item. It comes in many different places, and it's like a rounding error. A lot of SaaS companies that we use, Microsoft, Salesforce, they've embedded AI into their products, and it's fantastic. We want to do that. Well, some of that cost is bundled into their new license model. Some of that cost is bundled into the SKUs that may put in. A vendor that you work with may, increase their price, up to 12% and call it platform enhancement. So the first thing you see is it doesn't really just come in as a token cost. It comes in many other places, which makes it very hard to track. That's the first problem. The second piece is traditionally our software buying and our budgets is being modeled around seats license. AI flipped that model. It's now consumption. So our budgeting was not set up for that. It was not set up for consumption because the bill moves based on usage. How do you forecast for that? How do you model that?
And on model that you use.
Correct. Exactly, on the model that you use. So our traditional budgeting, which was focused on seats, which was predictable, and it's something that you can do for the year and you can kind of control that was easy. the CFO has a whole new realm now where there's this consumption model that we have to switch to. So that's the second issue that I think, that makes this challenging. The third I would say is, when you look at the spend, there's not a denominator that kind of goes in it. When you see the spend, you usually can divide it by anything, but we haven't tied it to the workflow or the workload that I've talked about. This is the cost per resolved ticket. This is the cost per invoice process. This is the cost per document review. These are all things we know AI can help, but we haven't tied it to that. We've tied it to models, or we've tied it to departments, which really those workloads go across. So you can't really tie it to something that's driving value within the company. The final piece that I would say is, the cost sits in place where the value is in a different piece. And what do I mean by that?
Interesting.
Engineering owns the API key to OpenAI. Engineering owns the API key to Claude. However, the commercial teams are the ones that actually get the benefits. So sales teams are using it, finance teams are using it. So the person
we
who
use
actually,
it, we have an open cloud with, in the
exactly.
cloud.
So the person who's driving the consumption is not really, managing that cost. So that's one of the things that we see when you look across, AI, because it's so powerful, is being spread across multiple areas. And I think those four pieces is what makes this such a challenge. And, it's one of the things that I think we have to get to the workload level in order to be able to understand the impact of the cost on the business.
No, that was beautiful. I think we at NOps have built few things around this where you can go down to at least, as a manager of the marketing department, I can see what my employees are spending. And it's difficult, right? But we also use other resources which are not directly attributed to us, right? Our Claude enterprise license, which and APIs, right? So it's and sales uses it, everybody is using it, right? And it's not that easy to just put a number on, okay, now marketing, tell me what is the value. We see the value because we are seeing the huge productivity improvements in employee. We are producing more blogs, better quality content, images and whatnot. So diving into, so let's say we have a handle on visibility, which is never, right now, it's not going to be a comprehensive or 100%, right? What do you then kind of recommend? How do you recommend them allocating across teams, application, or business unit, right? The value is the ultimate, but we are not there yet, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the promise of AI is tremendously enticing. And, we want to make sure when I'm working with my portfolio company, we're allocating budget for AI to those workloads and those activities that are actually going to drive some ROI, but at the same time balance adoption and experimentation. So, what I would say is very early in my golf journey, I was told, don't go for every hole. And what that means is I can't pull out a driver on every hole. If there's a hole that's very challenging, I may have to lay it up short with iron. And that's one of the things that I would say is as my game improved, I realized I can't hit driver on every hole. I have to go short. I have to manage the game and be smart about which holes that I attack. I see that same analogy with AI. We can't chase every use case. We can't go hard on every item that we experiment on because there needs to be a tangible ROI that we can measure. And I think that's one of the things. So when I work with, our portfolio companies, I say, okay, now we have visibility. How do I balance driving use cases that actually lead to value, but then at the same time, experimenting and not discouraging innovation? And the way I look at it, I look at it in kind of two lenses. back in my days at Coca-Cola, we used to have this chargeback model on shared resources. I do not encourage our companies to do that. We did that back then because we had a proven thing. A chargeback model is going to kill adoption. People are going to stop experimenting. They're going to go around the system and everyone is going to start to have their own cloud account. They're going to start having their own, OpenAI account. And then that's going to lead to another problem of just shadow AI budgets and shadow accounts, IP leakage. So really what I want to do, and what I encourage our portfolio companies to do, is instead of doing a chargeback model, do a showback. And what does that mean? Hey, every business unit sees its own number. Finance, this is what you guys are doing. Sales, this is what you guys are doing. Product engineering, they see their numbers on a monthly basis and they see how they see it on their peers. And it's tied to a behavior, because what that does is once you do show back, you say, hey, this is how much you guys are doing as your group. And you guys now have, are using these tools in a responsible way. That's the first step. The second piece into I see, which is the most critical, and this is the key thing I want everyone to say, is it ties back to not every AI use case is something that needs to get the same amount of budget and attention. Not all the AI dollars are the same AI dollars. You have to treat them separately. And I create them in 3 categories. My first category is run. What are the items in production? What are the items that customers are touching, load bearing? Is that one something that, AI is tied to it? I have to manage that. So if I'm using something in production that I'm using AI to do, let me look at the unit cost for that. Let me make sure that's being managed and let me optimize that every quarter, because this is consumption model. So I have to pay attention to that. That's my run bucket. And I'll put budget around that. My next bucket is my grow bucket. What are the workloads that, it's working, but I still need to scale it. I need some managerial return around it. It's cheap, but the dollar is still not there yet. But that's my experimental phase. Like, okay, I want to put some budget towards it. I want grow to eventually go to run, but there's some risk around it, and I just need to pay attention to it. My final bucket is explore, and that's my most important bucket in my opinion, because it's a bet. It's something that I need to manage this on a budget cap and on a time box, but not on an ROI. I'm betting that AI can completely transform this capability. I'm betting it.
But you're time boxing that.
Yeah, I'm time boxing that and I'm budgeting that. And I'm ensuring. So if I have those 3, run, grow, explore, I break out my AI budget across. Run is more proven. It's something that, it's maybe a lightweight. It might just be document rewriting, document ruin, just some rudimentary things. I'm going to allocate 70% of my AI token budget to those items because those are proven and those are actually driving value. My grow, I'm going to allocate 20% of my AI budget. And my explore, I'm going to allocate 10% of my AI budget.
Kind of like the financial portfolio management you want. Yeah. You
correct.
Manage it, not star one or the other bucket, but put a right amount to each.
Yeah. Now, this is the key. If you demand ROI from your explore bucket, you're going to get 0 experimentation and no creativity from your team. So that's how I have my portfolio think about it. Create some buckets and then put workloads in each one and then allocate your bucket of AI budget to that. And for the things that are like driving value is proven and it's a low risk, give more of your AI budget to that versus a lot of people now are throwing everything into an explore. Yeah. And they're not seeing the ROI and they're seeing their costs going out of the window.
The token maxing example. Yeah. Let's
exactly.
Just max
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, that's a really good insight, right? So I think very practical too. It requires some work, but a framework that you can use to kind of manage and not just manage. I think you want to leverage this innovation, which is once in a lifetime, that has come to us in a very very thoughtful way, and encourage innovation where it is required, as at the same time double down on things that are working or looks like it's working, and then kind of the in between where, oh, it's showing some good signs, let's also feed that, right? It's a that's awesome. We have one more question, and then we'll go to a demo. But we already have a lot of audience questions. But
Awesome.
This one is we see, CFOs, they get all lose their sleep. How am I gonna budget? Or this is like you said Uber as an example. The CFOs have a real problem in their hand, right? It's one thing to say, I'm going to experiment, do all of these things, exciting models coming out every week, but the CFO, and then they're going to ping the CIO or the CTOs. What is going on, guys? I didn't have this in my, the board meeting is coming up. How am I going to explain this? So what do you recommend? Like, how do you set the budgets, guardrails when, and the things change, like, Mythos is in, Fable is in, and the engineer wants to use it today, not tomorrow. And that has a very different pricing model than what you were using before. So what are some of your thoughts there? How do you manage the CFO relationship, the CIOs and the CTO, right? And the board, ultimately, right?
Ultimately the board. So, during my days as a CIO, the most important relationship I had was the relationship with my CFO. I mean, we're going to go play golf. We're having dinner. I think it's critical. And as a technology leader, where a lot of the costs that we are responsible for comes through our group, you have to have a tight relationship, and AI is making that even more critical. Traditionally, what I've been telling our CFOs and our CIOs is, one, CIOs, get closer to your CFOs if you're not. But two, we can't budget the total. We have to budget the unit costs. And that's where I want to land with it, as we go into the budget. The unit cost is what's really going to tie the value of that activity.
Kind of like what we did with cloud.
Correct.
What is the unit cost of serving a customer, or unit cost of this product? And by product, right, you have a freemium model. Then what is that free user costing me, right?
Absolutely. Because if we can measure the unit cost as we grow, if our unit cost is growing at a lower model or a lower rate as to our revenue as we're having in, or the customers that we're serving, then our profit margin is increasing. So right now, we can't even measure our unit cost because it's hard for us to tie that across the workload. So CFOs are coming to us and saying, hey, your budget for AI spend is $2 million this year. And by March, we're killing the budget. So we have to stop that. We can't no longer measure, especially for AI workflow, we can't measure our AI budget based on the total. It has to be based on a unit cost. And it's hard to do. It's something that, I talked about previously. So the annual budget, like I said, it can get blown. The other thing that I will say is policy, and implementing a policy around AI usage is not enough. Saying, hey, you need to do better prompting, you need to be more responsible, you need to make sure you're using the right models in these scenarios and not using more expensive models. Policy alone, especially from a governance, is not enough. These tools are powerful. They are, really productive. You're not going to just leave it up to individuals to change their behavior. It reminds me, Chintu, of what we see in the cyberspace. Yep. The entry frontier for cyber for a company is your personnel and how they are trained and how to respond. If they are opening up the wrong emails, if they're pushing out information, responding to fraud, that's your entry point. In here,
first line of AI, defense, yeah.
if you leave policy as a first line of defense for AI spend, it's going to go through the roof. You have to have some gates. You have to have some controls. So the question to ask is, how do we do that? How am I in working with my portfolio to do that? I do that in 3 ways. On the CFO side and on the CIO, I encourage my CIOs to forecast quarterly, not annually.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
We're in a consumption model. I know, we all are, you've heard the term shrinkflation.
Yeah.
And, you go to McDonald's and, the burger used to be so big and now the cost goes up and it's gone down. I get my coffee from Costco. I love it. And I used to pay for my bag of coffee that was, 24 ounce, and now the same price is 16, and I'm like, it's shrinkflation. The same thing is going to happen here with tokens. We are going to have shrinkflation in tokens, where you're going to have to use more tokens to get the same amount of work done. So if we don't measure it quarterly and be able to trend across to see if that's happening, and we have to move our workloads across models, by the end of the year, it's going to be too late if we're looking at it on an annual basis. So that's the first thing that I encourage my CIO to do when working with the CFO.
No, that's
second
awesome.
thing, yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
The second thing is, the guardrails have to be technical. They can't be procedural, as I mentioned, in terms of policy. A policy document is not a control. It's not a guardrail. Please be mindful of usage. That's not great. You have to have some real caps on the API key. Hey, this is the API key limit that we're going to allow per application. These are the only models that we're going to let this application get access to, or this is the only ones that we're going to have workloads. And these are the ceilings that we're going to set before we stop something or enforce something in the system. That's where I think, the opportunity is for products like NOps, where you can really kind of showcase, hey, you've set this limit for this workload, and this workload is within the first month of the quarter, and you're 10% away from that limit, and then it starts to drive a different behavior in terms of conversation. So because we're going to be in this consumption model, and we know that, the token rates are going to change and the unit costs are going to change, you have to have more frequency and more controls around that. My final piece, and I would love to get your thoughts, is you're going to have some tripwires and some name owners for the spend. It's not just going to be a dashboard that says, hey, this is what's going on. You have to have some automated alerts that says, at this threshold, someone is getting an email. At this threshold, someone is getting a text or a call. 50% of my monthly budget by day 10, there's a notification that's being sent out.
Yep.
If a single workflow double week over week, that's a phone call. So we have to have those tripwires that send out alerts that then requires us to have a conversation as to why that's happening. So I those are the 3 things that I think about in, how can the CFO and the CIO really work differently to manage this AI cost?
No, wonderful. I think you that's very comprehensive and very thoughtful. I'd like to show you what we have built. We have addressed some of this, right? The tripwire question, I think we are addressing it in 2 different ways. And one is just a normal usage, and then anomalies. A lot of companies are saying, we just see a sudden 500% spike, right? That has to be dealt differently than a employee that is on a path to consume their budget at a 25% higher than what you had budgeted for. So let me quickly go to, and then so from a demo, before I get into it, so what we are doing at NOps right now is we want to be comprehensive. On the left-hand side, we have, we ingest all the data, by model provider, by cloud AI platforms like Bedrock and whatnot, LLM gateways, right? dev tools and SaaS. Some of this are already there. I'll show it to you in a minute. And then the idea is like we provide, a fine-grained tracking of your cost. You can allocate some of this cost at the departmental level, project level, employee level. Like you said, the tripwires, right? Two different ways. One is like from a budgeting perspective, and the other one is anomaly detection and recommendation. And then we provide, the person or the CFO or the FinOps person a continuous budget governance. And then we also provide, like you said, I want to give this, managing the cost down to the manager who's managing the agents or the engineers, right? Because he or she is the one who would have best idea what that person or agent is doing, right? Whosoever. So if they're working on something, like you said, exploring something, and they need more tokens, he can approve it, and we have something called temporary or permanent approval, right? So we'll show this, and then we'll go into Q&A. But let's switch to remove this.
Yeah, let's see a product in action.
Yeah. So very quick, since we are kind of over at the time, but at very high level, we provide a dashboard, a single pane of glass that gives you all the integrations we have today, the Claude, Cursor, OpenAI, Bedrock, and all of that. You can see your spend. And how
everybody's using Opus 5.
Yeah. So that's like, okay, why is that the case? But we can drill down on this, right? So that gives you and then what we can do is, how is this tracking against the budget, right? More importantly, like you said, there could be one of the tripwires for the CFOs, like, okay, or the departmental heads, right? We go down to different groups, customer success, engineering, and break it down there. So if they are going over at 50%, then definitely I need to have that talk today, right? Versus 10% variance, yeah, maybe, okay, the manager should be handling that, versus 50% over, like, okay, I need to have that talk with the customer success or engineering head, right?
Yeah.
So that's basic.
And I mean, with this, I see that you can go down to the monthly level. So I know I recommend it
daily,
quarterly.
monthly, yeah. We have a daily.
If you have this visibility, you can just go into a monthly review to see who is, going over budget.
Yeah, exactly. And then we can hook up into your Workday accounts, or you can just simply upload a CRV and set up the groups, right? And then for every group, and allocate, like, okay, we have allocated $10 million or whatever, and engineering is going to be consuming 60% of that. And more importantly, we assign approvers. You can go as granular as you want. Okay. And that for engineering is Jordan, like for marketing is Chintu, right? So now I can and within each group you have employees, and by default you can set up some budgets and limits, right? So by default, you would say, I'm given $1,000 budget and I have 5 employees, everybody gets $200 a month, right? But you have an ability to, I know Adnan is working on this exploration. It's very important that we bring this to light. I can increase his limit for now, right? And then Adnan can also get alerts based on how he's tracking, right? That's, I think, is the most beautiful part here, where we, and so that is normal tracking. And then we have something called anomalies, the spend that is not matching in normal behavior in the past. So what I mean by that is, like, huge spike happening, we need to alert this to the people, right? And also in the cost allocation, we have a group called FinOps, and this could be, like you said, the overall owner of the cost. So as this gets, they can get a weekly report, they get alerted with, based on exceptions or rules you set up on how departments are doing, how they're tracking against the budget. And while managers are ultimately responsible to manage their cost, the centralized admin get to see everything, right? And then as the employees reach you can configure when they reach 80% of their limit, an automated request comes in to the manager, right? So in this case, we had $100 allocated to Manthan, right? Because it automatically tickets get opened. The manager has an option to look into, like, okay, what models is he spending money on? What kind of token he's spending money on, right? And this employees can see that too. So he has ability to manage some of this, right? What are the trends? How is he doing? Is it first week of month? Is the last week of month? He's like, okay, I need to get the feature out and I'm going to just spike my usage, right? How does that employee compare to rest of the team members? Is he doing something unusual than others, right? The manager would know what kind of projects he's working on, but based on that, you can kind of have those best practices. If Alan is always controlling his spend and also delivering on his output, maybe the employees can learn from each other, right? So this whole thread, and this gets all, and then finally, if it's a production activity, you can do approvals from here, right? You go temporarily approve this or permanent, right? If you're exploring something, you might say, okay, you know what? For next month or so, I'm going to keep approving this.
Yeah, because it ties into those three models that I talked about, right? Run, grow, and explore. So if you're an explorer, you may just say, hey, temporary, let them continue.
Yeah. And then we also do something called auto rebalancing. So at a departmental level, we can auto rebalance to make sure, you can stay within the budget if employee A is. So all of this is kind of work in progress. We are rapidly iterating on things, and we'll have more conversations with you. And we are meeting with companies and getting inputs. How can we improve this? And the game has just started. We are in first innings of this. Right.
This is good. I know you guys are talking to some of our portfolio companies, sharing this. This is top of mind because they are challenged with just managing the cost as well as adopting the tools. So I look forward to just continuing the partnership to just kind of share with you where we're seeing the need for the product. And like I said, it started off on the cloud side and we made great leads in that. Now AI is the new frontier with tokens. And there's a lot of similarities, but the breadth of the challenge is much bigger. And
10x, yeah.
We need to get it.
10x. And the people who consume are also pretty much everybody in the company. So we do have some questions already. So this is the first one from Tyrone. Is like, even though they don't exist, have you seen benchmarks for token consumption, right? AI spend across institutional portfolio companies. Are we there yet? Are you looking at some data?
Yeah. So great question, Tyrone. What I would say is I always like to look at it like there's some proven benchmarks that I've seen just on IT spend. And, on average, what I like to do whenever I go into my portfolio company is I like overall IT spend to be around 1.5 to 2% of top line revenue for the company, to just say that that's a healthy company that's investing in technology and not over-investing or under-investing. That range will change a little bit based on industry. So if I take that and then we'll say of that 1.5, let's go with 2%. Where does AI fall within that? The benchmarks that I'm seeing are closer towards, hey, if out of my 2%, I'm looking at, I want my AI spend, depending on where I am in my maturity, to be closer towards like 30%, to 35%. I'm seeing that, in terms of companies that are on the lower end of the maturity. And then I seen that number kind of increase as you go up the maturity level. The lens that I would like to get in there is where you are, instead of just the maturity level as a broad span, break out your use cases into run, explore, grow, and then explore. Yeah. And then break out your budget across that and then baseline it. So I actually want to take it to another level. Hey, if you have some production items, and you have more of that, your budget might need to be higher because you're probably going to get a better ROI. So
you're contributing to revenue or reducing. Yeah.
Correct. So, what I would say is like 30% is a good piece to start off with, Tyrone, to kind of give you a number. But I would challenge us to go in and go more granular and say, hey, can we break it out into those 3 categories? And then of that, do we push more towards the run and less towards the explore? Or do we push more towards the explore because we feel like we can control it and there's a better ROI on it?
So we have another question. This is from, I know, Bindu Sharma, who's a senior director of FinOps at Teradata, right? And a FinOps ambassador. She asked, like, hey, if this AI spend continues to grow, what is your major concern? Is it lack of visibility or accountability or insufficient control to manage the financial risk, and why? Pretty.
What I would always say is, I make this an analogy. You can't, grow what you can't measure. So my concern is lack of measurement around workloads. Is my first concern. My second concern, and the reason why that concerns me is I can't measure it if I feel I don't know what that is. My second concern is my lack of control around my unit costs. Mm-hmm. We are now in a consumption model. We are no longer in a seat model. And in a consumption model, if you think about this, for these AI hyperscalers and these frontier models that are running, they have costs. And their costs are tied to commodities that may fluctuate, such as power. So why are their token costs changing? Well, their token costs are changing because their costs are changing. And for us,
very dynamic world,
it's a very dynamic world. So if we move to this consumption model, my concern is my profit margins that I'm expecting are going to change. So we have to have these controls. And with any kind of change, I always say, there's these 3 A's. You got to have some awareness that this is a problem. That's the first A. The second is you have to have some action. The action is we're going to tool and we're going to bring in products like NOps, and we're going to create visibility. And then, we're going to have tied to workloads. And then, the final thing, is the adoption and the action, So you have awareness, acceptance, and the action. And the action is, hey, this is our new way of going to market. Our new way of going to market is that we're going to have all of these controls that we talked about. So this is a big concern for me when I'm dealing with my portfolio company, is we can't control these unit costs. And right now, I have to tie my unit costs to the workloads that I'm doing for me to truly feel that I can control that cost.
Yeah, ultimately, what is driving the business, right? Is the margins, and especially you want to have a good control over that. Knowingly, you might for time being, it's okay. The percentages are higher, but do we have a path to get there? The next question is from Talia 2.0, right? She's asking, one way you can do the governance is through model routing. And what is your framework, or how do you think about adding those routing control? And then I think importantly, this comes up all the time. The engineers are smart. Like, you're sending my request to this open source, and it's not really the quality I'm getting is not great, right? And the result it should be a value equation, not a cost equation. So how do you see, when do you recommend, and how do you implement the routers and such, right?
Talia, great question. It ties back to one of the things I mentioned before. We could put policies in place that says, hey, if you're an engineer and you're just asking a very rudimentary question, maybe you go to Sonic on Claude, and it's straightforward. But if you have something very hard that you want to do, then you may take that to Fable, because we know that there's just a different unit cost around that. If you leave it up to policy, that's not going to work. Behavior and having individuals just say, hey, I'm just going to do that from an adoption standpoint, it's not scalable. It's not something that's going to work. The way that I've looked at this is I've taken a product approach specifically around my high consumption users, which starts off with product engineering, where I'm seeing a lot of adoption, and then HR, and then after that, finance. And my product approach is, for product engineers specifically, let's have some harnesses in place that track, for the agents that you're building, what's the best model to execute that work. And then not only track what's the best model, but track the efficacy of that model over time to ensure that you're getting the right response for the number of token, so that if that efficacy changes, you can switch it to a different model. If there's an open source model, yes, because there's an assumption that once you find one model, that model's return is consistent, which is false. It changes over time. So, and that's why it has to be systematic. It has to be technical. So I believe in the product approach harnesses. There's different companies that we've been talking to that brings a harness approach to saying, these are the different models that are available. This is how your agent is performing week over week, month over month. The efficacy is going down, or this is a better model that has a cheaper unit cost that you may want to move to. That has to be systemized. And, whenever we think of governance heavily leans towards policies. The policy game here is not going to work if we want to manage costs. It's just a recommendation. We have to systemize it. We have to put some technical structure in place that measures the efficacy of these models over time, or introduces a new one that gives us a better unit cost economics.
Yeah, it's the good put, they call it, instead of throughput, right? Way over. So I'm going to go to the last question, and which is, I think, of interest to, let's see if I can get to it, but maybe. Yeah. So the last question is, like, if you have to share one recommendations to the CFOs and CIOs of your portfolio companies, right, and the CTOs, they should act on this quarter, right? What would be that, Jeffrey, right? Like they can do so many different things.
Correct.
But what would be that question?
So
or recommendations rather, yeah.
If there was one thing I would say is measure your unit cost of your AI workload, of your AI costs, measure it on a workload basis, and forecast on a quarterly basis. So for my CFO, forecast it on a quarterly basis, working with your CIO, not annually. Forecast that budget on a quarterly basis. For my CIOs, tie your unit cost per token use to a workload. Get to that. If we do those two combination between those two roles, we will get better visibility and predictability, and not these surprise bills. We will know that where we're trending, and we will cut it off much earlier. This was something that I did on my cloud days, where my analogy was the cloud is like someone came into your house, turned on the faucet, and then left.
Yeah.
AI is someone came into your house and turned on all the lights and all the faucets and everything, and then left for a year. It is so much more. You have to have some check-ins. You have to have some controls, and it has to be systematic. It cannot just be a policy. So that's what I would leave for the CFOs and CIOs, who are watching this, is to just really start working together and do it more frequently and get down to that unit cost and to that workload.
No, that's awesome. We are way over, but really enjoyed the conversation, Jeffrey. Very, very thoughtful. And thanks for sharing your insights with the audience. We're going to continue this. I know things keep moving, and maybe when we do this, love to do this in person and also on LinkedIn. Again, we meet and see where things stand, right? I think because everybody's working on this now. So
yeah. Let's do it on the golf course.
Yeah, let's do it on the golf course. Okay. So with that, I'm going to end the stream here.